Hello, everyone. Welcome to our banding Q&A. Let me get the background started so we can watch along with the banding events. I'm Sean Peterson, Cal PhD from a couple years ago.
And I'm Lynn Schofield. I'm an ornithologist with the Institute for Bird Populations. And what you're seeing in the background is a video from a few hours ago, right before the chicks got banded. And we will see the banding as it happens.
Yep. So just a little bit of background. So bird banding is the process of putting a metal or in some cases plastic band on a bird's leg that gives it a unique identifier. I kind of like to say it's like giving a bird a social security number. There's a unique number that each bird will get that is sent to a central database, and no other bird will get that number. So if you find a banded bird anywhere in the world, you would know exactly who that individual is. So we ban birds for a number of reasons, including for monitoring population health and population changes, for monitoring kind of demography and breeding condition. Bird movement is a big one.
And define demography for us, please. Let's not use jargon without defining it.
Yes, demography would be kind of understanding the relationship between ages and sexes in the population and understanding kind of those dynamics of a population. And then, one of the really big things that you get out of banding is bird movement. And that was what banding was originally kind of designed to do, was understand bird migration, because we really had no idea where birds went over winter. And so bands are a great way of being able to understand where birds are going.
Yeah, and Cal Falcons, we actually do have such a wonderful example of being able to get an understanding of where individuals born, in our case, on the Campanile, end up dispersing to later on, because one of Annie's chicks from several years ago, Laurentium, aka Larry, she was a large female who has now found herself living on Alcatraz Island after she was respotted prior to that, dispersing through the Marin Headlands. Clearly she didn't migrate very far to make it to Alcatraz, but we have an understanding of where at least that one individual ended up. And, as more and more sightings and data accrues, we get more and more understanding of what happens. So we will now we'll narrate a little bit about what's going on with the banding, mixed in with answering some of the questions that people are putting forth throughout the Q&A session. First of all, you'll notice that people are wearing helmets. As it happens, Annie and Archie both are very good at protecting their nest and have at least once hit someone a little too hard and a little too close. So it is now for anybody who's going to be standing up higher or spotting for the birds will have helmets on now.
So the banders working with us are from the University of California, Santa Cruz, the Predatory Bird Research Group. And they are monitoring peregrine falcon nests all across the Bay Area. So this is just one of many nests that they band at. Some of them have easy access, like the Campanile, where you just kind of walk up a spiral staircase inside a pillar and climb into kind of up a bunch of stairs and ladders. And then some are really, really difficult to get to. And there are some nests that they band at where they need a bunch of climbing gear, where they rappel down a cliff and are kind of hanging there on the side of a cliff while they band the birds.
And naturally, there are some nests that are in the Bay Area that the chicks will never get banded because they're simply inaccessible, such as those on the Richmond Bridge. But here we are seeing Zika Glux here, getting the first set of bands ready. Each individual is going to be wearing one band on each leg. One is going to have a longer set of digits that's totally unique amongst all birds banded anywhere in the United States. And the other one has fewer numbers So they can be larger and visible through binoculars when the bird starts moving around. But since it is fewer numbers, it will not be unique, amongst every single bird in the entire United States that's ever been banded.
Just a spoiler alert for everyone, I'm sure a lot of you know by now, but we had 2 male chicks and 2 female chicks this year. How do we know that they were males and females, considering they're only 3 weeks old?
All right. Well, at 3 weeks old, obviously they are not fully developed in terms of things like their feathers, but they are fully developed in terms of some characteristics like their legs. That's why we're able to band them at this age, because their legs are full grown. And now peregrine falcons, like most raptors, are what's known as sexually dimorphic. The males and females are different in their case in size, with females being quite a bit bigger, about 1/3 as much as males are. And so since we have full-grown legs on the birds, we are able to measure those legs and be able to infer based on leg size what their sex is. And a few other characteristics as well can help clue one in, because occasionally there is a leg size on a bird that's, somewhat in between. There's always some larger males, some smaller females out there, but it sounds like it's a pretty definitive thought that we have 2 males and 2 females here.
All right, so let's hit our first question. We'll go with this one. So there was a second bird band in the nest when they got there. There's a small bird band in the corner of the nest. It's a little blue band. And we see this actually pretty much every year. Where did that band come from?
So in addition to wildlife biologists, people who own birds naturally want to be able to band birds in the event that they perhaps get out into the world, needs to be identified otherwise. And so what group often has birds they own that are out in the world? And that is people who have racing and homing pigeons. So unfortunately, once, maybe twice every year, the peregrines here have caught and spotted and eaten a homing pigeon. And occasionally we do learn the owner of the homing pigeon, and occasionally we don't, but it's just kind of an unfortunate accident that comes up every so often. So we apologize to all those good-humored pigeon racers, because I know how much people enjoy them and love them.
So you can see in the video right now that Zika is getting a small piece of electrical tape ready. And that tape is going to be placed over the metal band. And it's a temporary indicator that allows us to very easily identify which chick is which, especially during Fledge watch, which is when we are kind of monitoring the first flights of the birds and making sure everything is going smoothly. It's pretty hard to kind of identify the chicks when they have a black band with white letters and numbers, and you need to really quickly identify which one is which. So that's why they put a small colorful piece of tape on the bands.
All right, so here's a question that comes up because people are reasonably concerned. It looks like there are several people on the tower in addition to just the banders. And it is true, there's actually somebody who is recording as well. But primarily the reason that there are several people on the tower is because we are now aware that Annie specifically can be very aggressive. And it's important to have a couple people helping to spot for our banders and to make sure they do not have a direct interaction with the adults while they're trying to work with the younger birds.
There are some nest sites where they go up with people with umbrellas around the nest to kind of guard the banders. But we just kind of make sure that the banders are protected behind the balcony and make sure there's plenty of eyes on Annie.
All right, let's see. So then that, answers this question. Has one of the parents ever dive bombed the handlers? And the answer is yes. Annie is getting more and more brave as she is getting more accustomed to seeing banders in her nest area at times. my understanding is that, from what I've heard, the further northern populations of peregrine falcons are much more aggressive because they are the larger populations. But
yeah, and Annie this year landed on the balcony and was very close to people. So it's possible that, you know, as in the future years, that she might get even more aggressive.
All right, now here's a good question. Hello, back to Montreal there. So what kind of tests are we doing with samples of feathers that we're taking? Because during the video, during the banding, you do see that 1 or 2 feathers are taken off of the breast, and there's actually quite a few things that you can learn from the feathers. And one of the things that is being looked into right now is mercury levels in wild populations of raptors, because birds will tend to accumulate signatures of mercury in their feathers, and it stays in their feathers. And, you know, the feathers develop once per year. And so that gives you a pretty good sense of how much mercury is in the environment generally, because it is a concern that it is in some places relatively prevalent and affecting some wildlife. Another thing that is being gained from these samples is you can get DNA information from these. And I know people have long been awaiting getting some results about the DNA of previous chicks. And a large overarching project is happening with many, many samples of peregrine falcons across the bay to look at how much genetic diversity there is, where they are moving, if birds are coming in from totally distinct populations with different genetics, if they're dispersing a lot. But because that study is trying to use data from across a large section of time and across this large population, it is taking time before we get to know our own little curiosities about our birds in specific, such as some parentage curiosities with the males from 2 years ago, Grinnell and Alden.
I wanted to add one other thing about the feather samples, too, just to echo Lynn's point about mercury, is we know that environmental toxins can be a really, really detrimental factor for populations of birds. Peregrine falcons almost went extinct exactly because of an environmental toxin, DDT. So being able to monitor stuff like mercury, or perhaps in the future other toxins, is a really important way to kind of keep on top of conserving their population.
All right, here's kind of an interesting question. So, you know, the males and females are different sizes. Are the eggs laid different sizes?
I believe the eggs are all the same size.
Yep.
But what I don't know about is, do the eggs differ across latitude? Are the northern birds, do they have bigger eggs?
No, the eggs tend to be the same size across populations, is my understanding. It's partially a matter of, between males and females and different populations, how quickly they are growing through time. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I believe eggs are consistent in size across populations, more or less, with, you know, some natural variation. Here's one. Do the chicks bite?
No, the chicks actually really don't bite. At this age, they don't actually do too much. They will make noise, which is, you can see that Zika has the chick covered by a soft cloth here. That's just to generally keep it relatively calm.
Mm-hmm.
Birds are very visual animals. And, you know, if you think about like a falconry falcon, they will have a hood on when they need to be calm, and not being able to see anything prevents them from being very aggressive. Similar with these wild individuals too. The babies, if they can't see what's going on, are generally a lot more calm than if they have vision exposed. But they don't really bite. They don't really have the strength to kind of get their talons into anything too much right now. So it's generally pretty safe to handle them.
Yeah. All right, here's one that I can provide a one-word answer for. Are they as soft as they look? Yes.
Yes. It's like having a little squirming pillow in your hands. Like, they are so soft. I mean, and really, you know, like, the most fancy pillows out there are made from like eiderdown, from bird feathers. Like, so yeah, they are super duper soft, mega soft. And yeah, when they're in this fluffy stage, you can kind of feel some of their kind of flight feathers coming in, little pins, but for the most part, just super fluffy.
All right, and here's a question: how do people get an opportunity to ban these birds? And first answer is, so Dr. Zika Gluck's here. She has a PhD. She's been working with birds for many, many years. And so that is, how she came to be able to learn a lot of these skills, is through that education. But there are, in different places, a few opportunities to learn some of these bird banding skills as a volunteer. The specific place I have in mind is in the Bay Area, in the Marin Headlands. The Golden Gate Raptor Observatory is a research organization that does, rely on a lot of volunteer efforts. And occasionally they do take people to train as banders to learn to band raptors. So it takes some work and some dedication, but there are some opportunities out there. And if this were something someone really was interested in getting involved, often with the hawk counting, potentially with the bird banding after some period of time, I'd recommend contacting the people at the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. And if nothing else, they have a lot of interesting information to provide. So really cool organization.
And I just want to add onto this is all bird banding activities are very highly controlled. We're doing science, and our goal is to do science with as minimal impact as possible. So you can't just go out and ban birds because it's fun, or because you want to cuddle a fluffy bird, which I know it looks fun and it looks like they're fluffy, and they are, but we're doing it because we want to answer specific scientific questions and provide a conservation benefit to the birds. We don't want to be doing this just because we can. We're doing this for a reason. So there are a lot of organizations out there that are looking for volunteers to help with banding, like Lynn said, but there's always a reason behind what they're doing.
All right, so here's a question, and the answer is a bit of a maybe, but will the chicks return to the nest after fledging?
Maybe. We have, in different years, we have seen different behaviors out of the chicks. They kind of choose a favorite spot on campus to hang out. And in some years it's on the campanile, and it's awesome. We get tons of footage of the chicks coming back to the top of the tower. And in some years it's not, and they spend most of the time on other buildings on campus, and we never really see them very much again. So we can't really predict that with any certainty. Most of the time, well, in all of our experience, the chicks have all left campus, left Berkeley around 2 months-ish after they fledge. And that's true for the vast majority of nests, but there have been a couple of instances, including one recorded this year, where a chick has stuck around at its parents' territory for a full year, and there's a bird in Europe that was seen feeding its siblings that were a year younger, which was really amazing to see. So sometimes, very rare instances, chicks will stick around for a lot longer.
Yeah, and kind of a point to make about that, this has been very rare. That's something that's only been observed once, maybe twice. So it's interesting that it was observed once on camera on a nest cam like this one. Do you remember whose camera that was?
I want to say like Barcelona, but I'm not sure.
We can maybe drop that information down if somebody messages us via social media. But anyways, this is such a totally new observation. But perhaps it's not that it's a new observation, but we're starting to see what the dynamics of a population of peregrine falcons that's just much larger than has been seen in the past. So I will be interested to see what other behaviors we start seeing as there's more interactions between more falcons through time. And so thinking of more falcons are out there through time, is Annie the first female to use this nest?
Yes, there has never been a record of a peregrine falcon nesting on campus or at all, and especially not the campanile, until Annie and Grinnell moved in at the start of 2017. So yeah, she is the first peregrine to establish this nest site. Hopefully she's around a lot longer, but if she does get displaced or die, we are very hopeful that there will continue to be birds at this nest site because it's a really good territory for falcons.
All right, so here's a good question. So how long do those fluffy down feathers last? And the answer is, depending on how you mean how long do they last, a falcon and pretty much any other bird is keeping fluffy down feathers throughout their life as adults, but of course they're covered up by those contour feathers, as they're known, those nice, sleek, waterproof outer feathers that are so very aerodynamic. And we're going to start to see those growing in on these birds quite soon. You can give me a more precise
probably
timeline.
About a week and a half, we'll really start to see those feathers coming in.
And you can see that those contour feathers are starting to develop a little bit, because you'll see little what's known as pin feathers. They're the contour feather within a sheath. And so they grow in like that in the little pin-shaped sheath. And once that rubs off, you see one of those grown contour feathers. Here's a nice bird behavior question. We see Archie and Annie often doing head bobs and dipping their head at one another. What is that communicating?
Yeah, that is a courtship behavior that peregrine falcons do, and other birds will do. We call it the head bow display, but it's really a method for them to kind of demonstrate the strength of the pair bond, reinforce that pair bond, and really kind of show their allegiance to each other. Part of it too is Archie kind of, I don't know if showing deference is the right word, but a female peregrine falcon is so much larger than a male. They could easily kill them anytime they want, and I think the head bow display also partially demonstrates that Archie, or the male, is not a threat to the female, and so she doesn't have to respond in a threatening way.
Yeah, and now this is a question not quite about falcons, but we get this a lot.
Yeah.
And why don't we have a live chat regularly on the stream? Because that would be fun. And just as short answer, it is a bit of a moderation issue. When there isn't someone around to act as moderator, occasionally things have gotten
very awry.
Things have gotten awry because people not so much interested in the falcons, but just looking for a platform will say stuff to say stuff. So that's why we try to make these opportunities when we do have somebody to talk to, for people to communicate. But it's just difficult to have it open all the time. But people are always invited to communicate via our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, the platform formerly known as Twitter. So yeah, let's see. And then we have a couple, just comments about, so how are the parents being distracted and displaced?
Yeah, so when they arrive initially at the nest, and in this instance, Annie was actually feeding, and we'll maybe get into kind of how that all went down a little bit later. But really what we're trying to do is find a kind of a good window for having the parents not be at the nest when we arrive, and making sure that we are positioning ourselves when we're banding in a way that the parents can't really easily get to us. And the campanile has a great structure for this because it has these tall balconies for us to hide behind, and pillars that prevent them from really swooping low at people. So that's the most of what they're doing is kind of providing the kind of a distracting presence so the banders can work unimpeded, and making sure that the parents don't land and then kind of run at the banders or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay, and so here's a question about falcon diet. So what other food do the chicks get other than bird meat? All we seem to see is bird meat. Are different peregrines providing different food, or is this every meal?
It is bird every meal, every day. Bird is what peregrines eat. They are specialists in hunting birds, especially in flight, and that's really what all of their traits have evolved them to be good at. They are incredibly fast divers and will basically chase down flying prey and hit them in the back of the head so hard that they instantly die. And so they don't hunt stuff that's on the ground, stuff that's sitting there. They want stuff to be in the air otherwise their pursuit method doesn't work. We have twice seen peregrines bring a rodent to this nest site. Just 2 times in the 5 years of footage that we have. And so it's a really, really rare occurrence. And
It's actually something of a rare occurrence with peregrine falcons because, animals in general, they're opportunists. So if a very easy opportunity comes up, they'll take it. So if there is a rat or a rodent that is very easily grabbed without much effort, they'll take it. But that can indicate that it was a rodent that was otherwise impaired potentially by rodenticides. So when we do see rodents come up, because that is so atypical for peregrine falcons, it does cause us a little bit of pause because there are these rodenticides in the environment. But so far, luckily, those 2 instances haven't seemed to show any negative effects on these birds. And here's a question. So can we even tell now what order they hatched in?
A little bit. What we can tell is that the youngest bird, we know who that is because the youngest bird has 2 days less of development and growth, and that is one of the males. So you can probably tell who it is because they are quite a bit smaller than their siblings. The other 3 all hatched on the same day, so they're really difficult to tell apart in what order they might have gone in.
Okay, and so what are the band colors? It looks like black and silver bands. And this is a good question because in many situations, these bands with the larger numbers would also come with a distinct color to go with them. And black is a distinct color. It was decided that falcons from the California population would get the black bands. Other populations have bands that are red or purple or other colors. But our birds, they get the black bands with the letters and numbers. And then the silver band, those are the standard aluminum ones that are issued for all bird banding efforts for all species.
I'm just going to interrupt before we get back to the colors of this and talk about what Zika is doing right now. She was spraying all of her equipment with bleach, and that is a attempt to mitigate the risk of avian influenza, which is a very, very dangerous disease for raptors in particular. If you think about influenza, the flu for humans, it's a respiratory disease. You might, cough, have a fever, sneeze, have runny nose. In birds, it's a neurologic disease. And birds that are infected with avian influenza will have seizures and very often die. It's a very high fatality, high mortality disease. So as I had mentioned earlier, the Santa Cruz Predatory Bird Research Group bans nests all over the Bay Area. And the last thing anyone wants is to have a risk of transmitting infection from one nest to another. So between every nest, they sanitize all of their equipment.
Yeah. And if people have more interest in learning about some of the issues regarding avian flu, last year we had a really great interview with the lead vet at the Minnesota Raptor Center, who is an expert on avian flu. And she had a lot of really good insight. And frankly, most of my knowledge about avian flu has come from her and the conversations we got to have with her. So. Yeah.
All right, and then to jump back and continue finishing answering this question, the band colors. So we've got silver and black, and then we have tape that went over the silver band, and we have blue and gold, tape, of course, because Cal. And then we went with green for the third tape color, and then the last bird has no tape at all.
Naturally, we chose not to do red because, we're avoiding the Stanford references, of course. Although actually Stanford has a nest with peregrine chicks in it as well.
I bet they're not as cute as ours, though.
Yeah. So here's a good question tangential to avian flu. This is with also epidemiology stuff. Do they have parasites already or insect bites? They're scratching their feathers a lot.
Most of the scratching you see is related to them growing in the feathers. The feathers, it itches a lot when they kind of emerge through the skin and are growing. And you imagine there's just tons and tons of feathers growing on these birds right now. So they are really kind of mostly itching to kind of feel better as the feathers grow. They almost certainly do have parasites, though. Pretty much every bird species in the world has a unique species of feather louse that is native to that bird. And they are passed from parent to offspring in the nest and any other kind of interactions those birds have in those species. So they probably do have parasites. They are very unlikely to cause any harm at this stage of life. There have been occasional reports of birds with heavy parasite loads dying in the nest, but it's very rare.
Yeah, and we've never seen with our chicks in instances where they have ended up on the ground. We haven't seen any significant parasite load in them, but Grinnell, the male that was on the nest several years ago, he did end up in a wildlife rehab center and did himself indeed have some parasites that we detected. So, we know that there are parasites that these birds have had, and they can sometimes persist in the nest areas. That's actually part of the reason. There's a bunch of reasons that this nice cliff face setup, the rocky substrate that they use, is very good for peregrine falcon nests, but that's one of the things that is helpful. The rocky substrate is much less likely than a stick nest to hold parasites, for a long duration, between seasons.
Let's do that one.
All right.
So Archie was around more earlier in the nesting. Or am I just not seeing him when I happen to check in? We see this every year with the male falcons in particular. They're there. They are pretty much a constant presence at the nest site. He is doing the vast majority of the hunting, so he's away more than Annie, but he's relatively frequently perched somewhere on the tower. We try to find him when we can. Often he's perched on the east side of the tower, but more frequently he's just perched up at the top or somewhere else that's not in view. But he's around. He's for sure around.
Yeah, and shout out to the efforts of, several people who spend a lot of time on the ground observing the activities of these falcons that we're not able to see from the nest cams, including quite notably Bridget Ahern at Moon Rabbit Rising on Instagram, who takes a lot of great photographs documenting what the birds are up to. Oh, and to move back a second, we mentioned that there was a camera that they had, one sibling feeding its younger siblings from the year younger siblings. Apparently the cam is in Madrid. So if people want to look for that, we encourage people to do so because it really is such an interesting behavior. Here's a good question. So for those who are able to watch them from below, do you have any advice for recognizing the falcons at a distance? And I'm unclear if you mean recognizing the falcons as falcons in general or differentiating between the two. Yeah. But we can answer both of those questions. Yeah. How do you spot a falcon? And then can you tell Annie and Archie apart from a distance?
So the keys to finding the falcons in general, is that you want to look for a bird with really, really pointy wings if it's in the air, and also one that's often very loud. The falcons are very, very loud. So if you hear a really loud bird flying around the campanile with really pointy wings, that's Archie or Annie. And then if you see a bird perched on the tower, it's almost certainly one of the falcons. They're very aggressive in defending their territory, and they are unlikely to tolerate any other birds coming in and landing on the tower. As for telling Archie and Annie apart in the air,
very, very difficult from a distance. Really, the best cue that you have is relative size. So only if they are together is it very clear. Those people who are watching the falcons quite a lot can differentiate them based on just habits and favorite hangouts and behaviors that they have, but that's a lot more subtle. And then before we move on, I want to point out that we have looped back to the beginning of this banding video. So the banding is not taking more than a half hour to conduct. We have gone back again just so, you know, our background and visualization for people to see is the banding activities. So just to clarify, so nobody is like, why are they still doing that? So here's a question, and this does make sense because occasionally you'll see all those chicks, each of which sort of squished into the tiny little bit of shade up on the campanile. Is the temperature about the same as on the ground?
It's more or less the same. It's a little warmer in the sun because it's a lot of concrete right there, and there's not really a ton of shade. But it's kind of the spot that they chose. You know, a lot of people are like, well, why did you put the nest box there? Why didn't you put it on one of the other sides? Well, that's where Annie chose to put the nest. We just built the box where she laid her eggs. You know, she must have felt that it was the correct place to put it. And
so
luckily, well, and then just to continue this temperature kind of thread, peregrine falcons are found all over the world. They can tolerate a really extreme spread of temperatures, from very cold up in the high Arctic to very, very hot in some of the desert areas, especially in the Middle East. And so the Bay Area the climate is just so nice that I don't think it's generally much of a worry that they're going to get overheated.
So have we been seeing more dual feedings with both parents feeding chicks this season?
Just the one. I think we just saw them. We might.
To be fair, that is more than we've ever seen. We've never seen them both actively feeding the chicks at the same time because usually if Annie is there, she wants to fill that role herself. So we've seen it a couple times, and that is infinitely more than we have seen in the past.
Yeah. I noticed the camera, Alcatraz, is that still Annie's offspring? Yes, that is a camera focused on Larry's nest. So Laurentium was one of the chicks, 3 chicks from 2018. She had 2 siblings, Californium and Berkelium, named after elements discovered at Berkeley. And she moved to Alcatraz and established a territory there. And so the chicks that you are seeing at Alcatraz are Annie and Grinnell's grand chicks, which is really fun to see. Yeah.
Oh, also, they're in response to why is Archie showing up on camera less? And this is indeed good insight. As the female chicks get bigger, they will be larger than Archie, and so males often will spend less time very close to their offspring as they get bigger and get stronger. So he's still approaching, but he'll become more and more standoffish through time, just because he's got offspring that are big and are going to be strong.
And in some years with female chicks, we have seen the male like fly into the nest box, drop some food, and then run away as fast as he can, because those female chicks can be terrifying.
Yeah. And so here's a good question. Do we have fledge watchers, scientists, volunteers that help keep the fledgling safe? And the answer is yes. And we will kind of announce when Fledge Watch is happening. But we like to, with this nest and a lot of the nests in urban areas, to have people and volunteers keeping an eye out, because although we don't want to interfere with, the natural course of the bird's life, ending up on the ground and in the middle of a road, part of the natural course of a falcon's life. So there are volunteers on the ground who are prepared to, if the fledglings end up in a dangerous location where they might, get hit by a car, where they might be exposed to dogs or predation of some other kind, to get them back up to the campanile so they can give the next shot for it. And we'll announce when that happens. There's a dedicated group of official fledge watchers, but it's also really fun to take that opportunity to come meet some of the Cal Falcon fledge watchers and learn a little bit more about the birds. And they'll often be spotting scopes and stuff up to see that. So we'll talk more about it.
We were wrong. The male that's feeding his year younger siblings is in Borgerhout in Belgium, and from the person who's actually monitoring the nest site.
Nice.
So there we go.
Right.
So sorry if we put it in Barcelona and then Madrid, and now we get it
all
right.
Right. We have the correct answer. We are being we are in the presence of falcon celebrity here, because that is such a cool observation, and I just am so amazed by that. And it's a really nice camera generally to watch.
All right. Where can these falcons be expected to nest after they are mature enough to leave? And so there are two ways, I guess, we could answer this question. The first is, where geographically do they go? And then the second would be, what kind of habitats would they use for nest sites? So I'll answer the first one as best I can, which is not very well, because we don't know very well what all of the dispersal capabilities of these birds are. There's still some technological limitations and kind of funding limitations to really being able to answer the big question of how far do chicks disperse, and where do they find their own territories. In the Bay Area, a lot of the falcons are resighted very close to home, but there's also a lot of people looking for falcons in the Bay Area. So maybe it's more of a bias towards the amount of effort that goes into looking for chicks in the Bay Area. But they have been known to travel hundreds of miles away from where they were hatched, and establishing territories. So Lynn, what does a falcon nest look like? What do they look for in a nest site?
Yeah, so what do they look for in a nest site? So the priority of a peregrine falcon is to have a location that is very safe from any interactions with predators and is protected from, things, being able to disturb the eggs, to disturb the chicks. And so they like things that are very high up and on rocky ledges. That is the preferred nesting site for them. And that's what, we're trying to simulate a bit by providing the nest box that provides a well-drained, rocky tray for them to lay their eggs in.
Very good question here. Why no avian flu vaccine? There are avian flu vaccines, and California condors are getting those. Why are our falcons not? Part of the answer, I think, is an expense question of producing the vaccine, and then going to the nest to vaccinate the chicks. The peregrine falcon population is relatively healthy, so we're not worried with peregrine falcons of a disease-induced collapse in the population. But the California condors are a little bit of a different animal, because there are so few of them in the wild, and so much effort has been invested in those individuals, that they are really kind of going all out to make sure that they are able to survive this kind of global bird epidemic.
So this person is curious about the first experiences of the chicks outside the nest. We did recently observe a chick sort of awkwardly fall out of the little nest box and onto the campanile balcony. So what do those first experiences look like? What are we going to see as they start moving around more?
Yeah, so they're going to start leaving the nest box pretty soon. There are it's a behavior that is called branching, because in other raptors they're often in stick nests where they leave the nest but are still in the branches of the tree they're in. And branching behavior in falcons, and especially at this nest site, involve just leaving the nest box and exploring, playing around, chasing each other, flapping. It's a very fun time of year, and we're getting pretty close to a really good kind of adventuring time for the chicks. The first kind of instances they're all about exploration. The first chick happened to fall out. We saw that last year too. It didn't really intend to leave the nest, but it got back in pretty easily. So I think it's just a matter of days before they're out wandering around and exploring.
Yeah, and what kind of becomes interesting to see is as they start exploring just kind of on foot before they can fly on the ledge, we'll see them do things like trying to catch moths, getting a little bit of play and practice in for hunting. You'll see them kind of jumping on and playing with each other. You'll see behaviors with them kind of jumping on feathers and stuff. So there's a little bit of, with the branching, just play, exercise, getting some of that out. And that's kind of an advantage that these birds have that many don't, is before they take the full fledge and away from the nest box, they have some time to, stretch wings, get a few things figured out before they go. And so here's, do falcons ever predate upon crows?
They do. It's not super common. Crows are a very large, aggressive, and smart bird that often travel in groups, and they are often in kind of denser cover, so that they aren't the ideal target for falcons that are hunting. But falcons have been recorded eating everything in size from a hummingbird to a sandhill crane. So a crow is perfectly within their capabilities, but we have not really seen that happen very often. I think we had one crow end up at the nest site, but for the most part, the big targets at the campanile are pigeons, mourning doves, robins, and shorebirds.
Yeah, and kind of also the inverse. Occasionally, crows will predate upon peregrine falcon chicks or eggs, or they will mob and harass fledglings as they're trying to leave the nest. So falcons pose a threat to crows, and crows actually pose a little bit of a threat to falcons as well. So there's a pretty adversarial relationship between those two species. Let's see. I had the next question kind of lined up here, but here's just kind of a good one. Okay, so do the males or the females, which color combinations do they have? Do you know that off the top of your head right now?
Let me pull that up.
All right, we are looking at our group text chain right now.
Okay, so the females are yellow and green, and the males are no color and blue.
All right, and then okay, yellow and green are females, no color, and blue are males. Okay, that all makes sense. So when they're feeding, are the parents attempting to distribute the food equally, or is who gets what sort of up to the chicks?
This is a really good question, and I think this is one thing that is very different about peregrine falcons when compared with some other raptor nests that people might have cameras on, is that there's very little competition between the chicks for food. The parent really drives who is getting food, and the parents are really good about distributing food equally. In some other species, especially like bald eagles, there's quite a bit of competition between chicks for food. Well, they'll try to exclude their siblings from getting food. But that's not the case in peregrines. It's a pretty egalitarian society up there on the Campanile.
Yeah. Whereas there are some species where siblicide is pretty much the norm. Pelicans, for example, often will have 2 chicks, but the stronger of the 2 will be the one that they're able to take care of and will be the one that will survive. So
there's a number of species of birds that purposefully lay extra eggs so that they have kind of the guarantee that something is going to hatch, or high likelihood that something is going to hatch. But then once the birds hatch, will often neglect one of the chicks or multiple of the chicks and really prioritize one.
And thankfully, that's not the dynamic with the peregrine falcons, because it just, we have an attachment to these individuals. It's nice to have. And so I was going to just do just to make reference to the fact that we have some name ideas that people are coming up with, and we're going to officially open up peregrine falcon chick name ideas
in 9 minutes.
Yes, after this live stream is up, we are going to post our posts on Instagram, formerly Twitter, and Facebook for people to put forth suggestions, for people to like and heart and whatever ones that they think would be good, and the kind of top most popular names will aggregate and put to an official vote. So get ready with your name ideas. And
the big change this year, by popular vote, we are keeping a theme for all 4 names. So think of 4 names that fit together and have some sort of theme. And those posts will go live in again about 9 minutes. So unfortunately, I can't send that link to the chat or anything right now because it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah. You were going for another question a second ago.
Why don't we band with geochips or taggers or something that would provide that location? Is it because they would try to eat the chip? It's not so much a worry about them eating it. There's 2 major concerns. The first is that we need to have a tracker, a logger that is able to record data. So that needs energy. So there are, on some bigger birds, you can put a satellite transmitter or something that has a small solar cell on it. So it can constantly gather energy from the sun. Most smaller birds need to have something with a battery. So then you're limited to battery size, and you can't fit that on a bird's leg. That's going to interfere with their ability to hunt, ability to fly, everything like that. So that would need to be a backpack on their back, and that's a whole question of how you attach that. And then when we talk about, attaching things to chicks, their legs are fully grown when we band them, but their bodies are not. Their bodies are not fully grown for another probably a week and a half or so. But that's getting to the age where if you go up there and try to put a transmitter on a chick, it's going to be running around like crazy up there, and potentially could fall off the building, which would be just a disaster. So there might just not really be the ability to get the chicks at the right age where you could put a transmitter on and have it be safe for those chicks.
Yeah, and the technologies are evolving. There are some ideas to kind of get at some of these questions a little more, but right now, just with the resources that we have, the funding we have, and the technology available, we're not quite there yet. Although if there's someone out there who wants to start a PhD regarding some of the dispersal of falcons in the Bay Area, talk with us if you have a serious interest, because we would be happy to consult and potentially collaborate. And then another banding logistics. Why aren't we banding the parents? Wouldn't it be so nice if Annie and Archie had bands and we'd know immediately who was who?
It would be so nice. That was one of the nice things about having Grinnell at the nest, was because you just really easily identify him because he was banded. It is really, really hard to catch an adult peregrine falcon, especially at the nest site, because they're often on cliffs or on tops of buildings. So there's no way to get a net up there. So it's a really difficult area to work in. You can sometimes trap them during migration, that was how Larry was captured the year after, or the year she left the nest, at a dedicated migration banding site. So yeah, that's why we can't kind of catch the parents.
Yeah. And then, for the Alcatraz chicks and also chicks at all sorts of other boxes, do they have areas off camera to explore or wander? Is their nest just smaller?
They do have areas off camera to explore. My understanding of the layout of the Alcatraz nest is that it is very close to a seabird rookery, and that there's space there, but there's also other birds using that space. So that's one of the main reasons why they can't band at that site, is because they would be disturbing the kind of other bird species that live there on other nest sites. So a lot of peregrine falcon nests do have these kind of cliffs with kind of ledges and stuff for birds to explore into, but the campanile is relatively unique in the amount of space that the chicks have to wander and explore.
All right.
I did see someone posted that it's not only the Belgian nest, but also the Madrid nest. So there are 2 instances this year where there's a second-year male feeding its siblings, which is crazy because that's a really, really unique behavior.
Okay. All right. So that does kind of speak to the point, though, that although this has really not been observed before, now there are 2 well-known nests where we're seeing this happening. And so that, maybe does indicate something, that now that peregrine falcon populations are much higher, we're seeing these sort of interactive behaviors that we have not in the past. So
I like this question up here.
Let's see.
Was the little chick standing in front of the other 3 with its wings spread, trying to protect the others during banding today? Probably not. What it was probably trying to do was to look big and ferocious, and like something that a predator would not want to grab. So that's one of the primary anti-predator defense responses that you see in a lot of animals, is to try to look bigger. And that's what we do with, like, if you're in mountain lion territory, what you're supposed to do is like spread your arms wide and, put like a log on your head or something.
What?
I don't know. I think you're supposed to like put a log on your head.
That one's new to me.
But you're just trying to look bigger is a good way to discourage predation.
Yeah, although, it's difficult to say. Yeah, that's a classic defensive posture. It's doing that to defend itself, whether or not it has any notion of defending the nest box more so is hard to say, because they do have some relationship with siblings, but I'm going to guess it's just a general, this is my defensive pose and there is a threat. And, how much more thought is going into who specifically is being defended is hard to say. All right. Let's see. Oh, just to clarify, one male does not have the electrical tape. So they all have their bands, but one male doesn't have a specific additional temporary color. So
the combinations, if you're looking just at color, are black and green, black and yellow, black and blue, and black and silver are the 4 combinations.
Yeah, and then to reiterate on this, why are the parents not preventing the banding?
Oh, they are trying. They are very aggressive in responding and defending the nest. And you can actually see in the video that we took from the other angles, they're on YouTube, you can see the other angles where the falcons are pretty aggressively defending against the banders. So they try to drive them away as quickly as they can.
Also, here's just is predate a verb now? Don't we still say prey? And English might feel that prey upon is the correct thing to say, but the scientific literature does use the word predate quite a bit.
Yes.
So this might be a disagreement between proper English and what scientists say in papers. So
And then to confuse it even more, there's depredate,
which means the same thing. That's an inflammable, flammable thing here. So that is the thing about linguistics, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I am not an expert on that. Yeah. Classicists love raptors. And I'm seeing lots of name suggestions now coming in. So it should be posted right now as of this moment.
Hopefully, if our robot posted it correctly, it'll be up right now. If not, given at least 10 minutes, there's sometimes a little bit of a delay.
But now's your moment.
Now's your time to shine. And if you see good name suggestions, please give them a like, upvote, heart, or whatever social media thing that you can, because that will help determine which ones will be kind of sent on to the finalists.
All right. And with that, oh yes, and also predate, yes. In Fluffle, we're also trying to get into the scientific literature too now, so gonna add that to our lexicon.
I think in Fluffle has a chance to be a real word. I mean, it's like a real behavior, like, you know.
Yeah, it comes up. It needs to come up occasionally discussing animal behavior.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll leave it at that with trying to get in Fluffle into some scientific literature for you all. And it has been a pleasure to answer some questions. It's so nice to see enthusiasm about these birds, because boy, am I enthusiastic about them as well. And it's so nice to see 4 chicks, and I look forward to seeing them developing. And any more questions people have, we're always answering questions on social media. We have a couple more live Q&As, especially around Fledge time. And if you come out during the Fledge watch period, you might be able to find some of the falcon experts in the flesh.
Yeah, and I think they should have like stickers and stuff. So if you come find us, we'll probably have stickers.
Oh yeah, with the
with some
make
Falcon
way
merch.
For falcons.
We've got some Falcon merch
design.
Available. So if you like falcons and like shirts,
in homage to the classic children's book, Make Way for Ducklings. All right. Well, thank you all, and we'll leave it there. And we look forward to seeing people's name suggestions.